Okay, good evening, my friends. Good evening, my students. It's been quite a while that we did not meet, but for this time, allow me to discuss with you some important topics about gender relations. And last time, we were discussing about the different sociological theory that is associated with the study of gender. Yan, the study of gender. And ano ba yung nabanggit natin? What are those things that we discussed last time? We discussed the different first as a background before I introduce you to the PowerPoint presentation. Allow me first to make a review of the things that we discussed. So una, diniscuss natin yung mga important concepts na mai-encounter natin later on sa pag-aaral natin ng gender, lalong-lalo na when we go to the study of gender analysis. Okay, not only with the study of gender analysis, but in all forms of tawag doon, all forms of study of anything about gender, you will encounter these terms. Like, for example, first we discuss the meaning of status. What is a status? So, a status is a category or position a person occupies that is a significant determinant of how she or he will be defined and treated. Then, we also have another term is status set. So, a status set. A status set is we occupy a number of statuses simultaneously referred to as status set, such as mother, daughter, attorney, patient, employee, and passengers. Ibig sabihin nito, pag sinabi nating status set, ibig sabihin, ito yung mga ginagampanan nating mga role sa buhay. Maybe some of you are mothers, at the same time you're a daughter to your parents, or perhaps you are exercising a particular profession, maybe you're a doctor. So, pag ikaw ay doktor, iba naman yung status mo as a doctor. Pag ikaw ay housewife, iba naman yung status mo as housewife. Pag ikaw naman ay mother, iba naman ang status mo as a mother. So there are people who perform several roles. Actually, most of us are performing different kinds of role. That's why ang tawag niyan ay status set. Okay. Now, lahat ng mga society, all society are categorized members by status and then rank this status in some fashion, thereby creating a system of social stratification. So take note of the term, social stratification. Ang ibig sabihin ng social stratification, ito yung kung paano nirarank ng society ang mga status. Kasi 'di ba may mga status na mas mataas, may status na mas mababa. Depende siguro 'yon sa kultura at depende rin siguro 'yon sa pamantayan ng isang society. Okay. So kaya minsan ang pagtatalaan ng mga roles sa society is arbitrary. This is arbitrary. Kumbaga ito ay idinidikta ng pamantayan, kultura at pananaw ng isang pamayanan. Okay. Now, let's go to another basic term which is what we call a role. Yan, the role. Role is the expected behavior associated with a status. Like for example, halimbawa, kung ikaw ay isang doktor, so tayo ay mayroong mga inaasahan na karakteristik ng isang doktor. Halimbawa naman pag ang isang tao ay isang nurse, so merong associated naman na role. Halimbawa naman pag ikaw ay like a street sweeper, for example, there are certain roles expected of you. Kaya minsan pag ang tao ay nagde-deviate tayo sa role na natin, na kilala tayo ng society bilang ganyan, minsan nagtataka sila. So in other words, nagkakaroon ng people form a certain amount or form of judgment against the person because of this kind of things that we usually encounter. Okay. So another key concept for the sociology of gender is the word tinatawag natin na stereotypes. Yan, stereotypes. Ang pag sinabi natin stereotypes, this has something to do with oversimplified conception that people who occupy the same status group share certain traits in common. Kumbaga parang generalized judgment siya na kumbaga we put people in a set or subset and we judge all of them in that kind of fashion. Kumbaga isang judgment lang. Kumbaga very sweeping na judgment at categorization na minsan hindi natin masyadong tinitingnan. Halimbawa ang example ng mga stereotypes. Pag babae ngaya ay iyakin, pag lalaking iyakin ay bakla, o kaya pag ang lalaki dapat matigas. Yan. These are examples of stereotypes, example of generalized or oversimplified conception of things na wala naman tayong basihan. Kasi hindi naman sa totoo, hindi naman lahat ganyan na tao ay ganyan. So, kumbaga, nawawala yung objectivity. Okay. Another term in the sociology of gender is the word sexism. You know, sexism is a term which means this is the belief that the status of the female is inferior to the status of the male. Yan, status of the male. Okay. Compared to males, for example, females are more likely to occupy statuses inside and outside of their home than are associated with less power, or power and less prestige. Yan, kumbaga kung dadalhin natin ito sa konsepto ng gender, relationship between male and female, we will find out that most of the females occupy certain roles that are less powerful or that are not prestigious, kasi nga it is associated, yung kanilang mga roles are associated with reproduction. So sexism is perpetuated by a social system called patriarchy. Yan, patriarchy, from the word patriarch, meaning to say a family or a society headed by the father. Kaya patriarchy. So it is a male-dominated social structure leading to the oppression of women. So kaya kung titingnan natin sa society, ang naging batayan ng historical oppression ng mga kababaihan, itong social system na tinatawag natin na patriarchy. And this kind of system is prevalent in our society, prevalent in many society. Kahit hindi natin nakikita, ito ay nagaganap in a very subtle way. So patriarchy, by definition, exhibits androcentrism. Yan, another term, androcentrism, from the word andro, meaning man or male. Centrism, meaning to say male-centered. So androcentrism. So this is a male-centered norm operating throughout all the social institutions that become the standard to which all persons should adhere. Kumbaga, yung mga konsepto na related to manhood, to male, yun ang nagiging batayan natin at ginagawa natin na general para sa lahat. At ito ay nakikita sa mga language natin, di ba? Sa language, especially in the English language, makikita mo yung dominance ng pag sinabing halimbawa, man. What is man? Man refers to all kinds of human beings. Yan. Whether male or female, man. Yan ang konsepto noon. Pag sinabing man, sakop na ngaya gabus ka iyan. Pag kaiba na sa mga babae dyan. But sabi ng mga feminist, ano daw, mali yun kasi yung man is refers only to the male. That is the effect of androcentrism. So ginagawa nating batayan, kumbaga para sa atin, superior yung mga characteristics sa panlalaki, kaya yun ang nagiging general na batayan natin. Pero sabi ng mga feminist, mali daw yun. Dapat we should use inclusive language. Yan. Kaya instead nga of saying man, we say human being. So parang ganon. So ginagawa mong gender-free yung language. Although sa ating lingwaheng Pilipino ay hindi natin masyadong problema ang language kasi nga ang tawag doon, kasi nga walang gender yung natin, yung language natin. Generalize yung mga pronouns natin, mga words na ginagamit natin, it applies to everybody. Yan. Okay. So yan ang mga terms na Okay, so let us go to let us review some of the different sociological theory. So sabi nga natin, ano ang mga theory ang mga theory, ito ay, sabi nga, kung if we will define theory, ang theory, ito yung sinasabi natin na a set of assumptions, a set of concepts and assumptions that explains a particular thing. So it is a kind of lens. Halimbawa, pareho yan sa mga, halimbawa, meron kang iba-ibang klase ng mga salamin sa mata. Halimbawa, yung isang salamin mo ang kulay ay brown, ang isa ay kulay green, yung isa naman ay clear, yung isa naman ay yellow. So pag sinuot mo yung yellow salamin, ang makikita mo ay yellow. Pag sinuot mo naman ng green, makikita mo na ang lahat ay nakukulayan ng green. So kumbaga, ganun ang ibig sabihin niyan. So ang theory ay ito yung mga pamamaraan o paraan ng ating pag-unawa, pagbibigay natin ng coherence or a sense of order to the perceived world na nasa isip natin. So kumbaga, yan ang uh, kumbaga para siyang mga kahon na lahat ng mga bagay ay nilalagay natin sa mga kahon na yan and sinusukat natin yung lahat ng bagay batay sa kahon na yan. So anything that does not belong to that box is eliminated. So yan ang ibig sabihin ng theory. Ang theory ay isang paraan ng pagtingin sa reality. Kaya lang yun nga lang ang mga theory ay mga perspectives lang yon. So ibig sabihin it does not totally see everything, but it gives you a coherent way in order to interpret reality. So in understanding the nature of society, we also have this kind of theory. And one of the oldest theory or the most of the classical theory in sociology is what we call functionalism. Yan, functionalism. And sometimes functionalism is also known as structural functionalism. So it is a macro-sociological perspective that is based on the premise that society is made up of interdependent parts, each of which contribute to the functioning of the wholes of society. And functionalists seek to identify the basic elements or parts of society and determine the functions these parts play in meeting basic social needs in predictable ways. So functionalists ask how any given element of social structure contributes to the overall social stability, balance, and equilibrium. Kumbaga, sa simpleng pagpapaliwanag, ang functionalism, ang pananaw niya sa society ay para siyang isang machine na ang machine na to ay may iba't ibang ang machine na ito ay may iba't ibang functions, parts, at ang bawat parts ay may function. So ngayon, ang role ng sociologist o kaya ng tao ay pag-aralan yung mga parts na yon at unawain kung paano ang parts na yon ay nakakatulong sa pag-function ng organism na yon. So anything na kaya pag ang society ay nagkakaroon ng problema o kaya nagkakaroon ng mga hidwaan o kaya kung ano pa man, sinasabi ng functionalism na perhaps there is one part of that organism that is not functioning well. There is a dysfunction. So it results to a particular dysfunction. So iyan ang ibig sabihin ng functionalism. So may dalawang uri yan functionalism na yan. May tinatawag na during the pre-industrial society and during the contemporary society. So noong pre-industrial society, the functionalists suggest that in that society, social equilibrium was maintained by assigning different tasks to men and women, given the hunting and gathering and subsistence farming activities of most pre-industrial society. So the role specialization according to gender was considered a functional necessity. Kaya nung pre-industrial society daw, yung mga tao, primitive pa yung economic system nila, yung kanilang mga roles ng babae at sa lalaki ay nadidefine siya ng reproductive work. Kasi dalawang klase ang work, di ba? Productive at reproductive. Yung productive has something to do with the economy, yung reproductive has something to do with the multiplication of human beings. Siyempre, yung mga babae, they are tied to childbearing and child rearing. Kaya yung mga roles na ginagampanan nila are all associated with domestic work because hindi naman sila pwedeng lumabas at maghunting kasi nga sino mag-aalaga ng kanilang mga anak. That's why they were tied to domestic role. Yan. And functionalism look at it as a kumbaga yun ang pinakamainam na structure ng society. Kaya 'di ba naisip 'di ba sinasabi natin sa Pilipino, sa Tagalog, may kasabihan tayo na ang tatay ay haligi ng tahanan, ang nanay ang ilaw ng tahanan. So kumbaga, it alludes to the functionalist view of or the gendered view of the role of men and women. Bakit ilaw ang nanay? Kasi yung nanay, siya ang palaging nasa bahay. Siya ang palaging kasama ng mga bata, mga anak. Siya ang nagtuturo sa mga anak, 'di ba, sa mga bata. So therefore, siya ang ilaw. At siya naman ang nagbibigay ng nagsisilbi sa kanyang asawa. Kaya sinasabing siya ang ilaw ng tahanan. So pag sinabi naman natin na haligi ng tahanan, sinasabi natin na haligi ng tahanan sapagkat yung tatay haligi ng tahanan sapagkat siya ang naghahanap buhay, siya ang nagbibigay, he's the one putting the bread on the table, and etc. or similar things like that. Okay. So ngayon, sa contemporary society, sa panahon natin ngayon, similar principles apply to families in contemporary societies. Disruption is minimized, harmony is maximized, and families benefit when spouses assume complementary, specialized, non-overlapping roles. So, when the husband or father takes the instrumental role, he is expected to maintain the physical integrity of the family by providing food and shelter and linking the family to the world outside the home. So, when the wife mother takes the expressive role, she is expected to cement relationship and provide emotional support and nurturing activities that ensure the household runs smoothly. So ito na po ang sinasabi ko na ito na po yung sinasabi ko kanina na tawag doon na ilaw ng tahanan at haligi ng tahanan. Okay, so ngayon, ano ang critique? What is the best critique? Yan, kasi wala namang theory na perfect. So meron siyang kahinaan. Ito yon. So it should be apparent that functionalism's emphasis on social equilibrium contribute to its image as an inherently conservative theoretical perspective. So this image is reinforced by its difficulty in accounting for a variety of existing family systems and in not keeping pace with rapid social change, moving families toward more egalitarian attitudes regarding gender roles. So often, to the dismay of the scientists who develop them, scientific theories and the research on which they are based are routinely employed to support a range of ideologies. Functionalism has been used as a justification for male dominance and gender stratification. So, for example, in America, the functional analyses were popularized in the 1950s when the weary of war, the nation latched onto a traditional and idealized version of the family and attempted to establish not just a pre-war, but a pre-depression existence. So functionalism tends to support a white middle class family model, emphasizing the economic activities of the male household head and domestic activities of his female subordinate. Yan ang critique ng functionalism. Pero may advantage din yung functionalism. To its credit, functionalism offers a reasonably sound explanation for the origin of gender roles and demonstrate the functional utility of assigning tasks on the basis of gender in subsistence economies or in regions in which large families are functional and where functional also acknowledge that certain strain occurs when there is a too sharp a divide between the public and private sphere. So particularly for the women, they recognize that such a divide is artificial and dysfunctional when families need to cope with the growing interdependence called for in the global economy. So the superwoman who does it all in career achievement and family nurturance will be valued. So finally, the neo-functionalism accounts for the multiple level where gender roles are operative, biological, psychological, social, cultural, and functionalist examination of their interdependence and allows to understand how female subordination and male superiority become reproduced throughout the globe. Okay, let's go back to continue with our discussion. And here um, we are on the conflict theory. Yan. With its assumption about social order and social chains, the macro sociological perspective of conflict theory, also referred to as the social conflict theory, is in many ways a mirror image of functionalism. Unlike functionalists who believe that social order is maintained through the value consensus, conflict theories assert that it is preserved involuntarily through the exercise of power one social class and hold over another. And actually, itong conflict theory is based actually on the works of Karl Marx and Frederick Engels and their theory about the social class. Actually, I have already explained this to you many times, especially kasi ang theory ni Karl Marx ay nakasalalay ito doon sa economic and history. Na sabi niya because of the when the economic system becomes complicated, there is also the division of classes. Nagkakaroon na ng mga classes ng mga tao, klase ng mga tao, antas ng mga tao dahil nga sa kanilang ginagampanan na role. So like for example during medieval times or during the feudalism, itong antas na ito nakikita ito sa relationship ng mga taong nagmamay-ari ng lupa at yung mga taong walang lupa na nakikigamit lang ng lupa. Yung tinatawag natin na the lord and the tenants, di ba? Landlord and the tenants. So yan. Pagdating naman doon sa industrial system, nakita natin na there is now the relationship between the capitalist, the one who owns the means of production, and then you also have the tawag doon, you also have the workers. So it's between the capitalist, the one who own the means of production, and the laborers. So sabi ni Karl Marx, eventually, sabi niya, ang economic theory niya is that the rich become richer, the poor become poorer. This is because the one who gains the surplus of labor is the capitalist, while the laborers are not given the benefit to enjoy from the surplus of labor. So iyan po ang mga ano diyan, ibig sabihin niyan. And pero ang isa sa mga criticism sa itong tinatawag natin na conflict theory is that hindi siya masyadong nag-touch doon sa relationship ng male and female. Kaya minsan ang theory na ito ay hindi siya gaanong nagagamit sa pag-i-explain ng gender relations kasi wala siyang parang malabo yung dimensions ng gender relations sa theory ito. Then we also have another theory which is symbolic interactionism. Take note of this, symbolic interactionism. Yan. Ano ang ibig sabihin ng symbolic interactionism? So, symbolic interactionism is also called the interactionist perspective. It is at the heart of the sociological view of social interaction at the micro level with attention to the people's behavior in face-to-face social settings. Symbolic interactionists explain social interaction as a dynamic process in which people continually modify their behavior as a result of interaction itself. So, isa sa mga significant exponent ng theory nito ay si Herbert Blumer from 1900 to 1987, who originated the term symbolic interactionism. He asserted that people do not respond directly to the world around them, but to the meaning they bring to it. Yan, kumbaga, yung relationship natin, interaction natin with the world, interaction natin with the other people, nagkakaroon siya ng kahulugan sa atin. Binibigyan natin ito ng kahulugan. And society, its institution and its social structure exists, that is, social reality is bestowed only through human interaction. Kaya yung human society natin, yung lipunan, nagkakaroon siya ng character, na perceive natin siya, na i-interpret natin siyang ganito because nga of our interaction. Kasi tayo mismo collectively, individually and collectively, tayo ang nagbibigay kahulugan sa society nito. So people interact according to how they perceive the situation. At itong mga interpretation natin becomes the norm. Kumbaga ito na ang nagiging batayan ng ating pag-unawa sa mga bagay na nakapaligid sa atin. Okay. So sabi dito, to illustrate the symbolic interaction emphasis of the fluidity of behavior, kasi nasabi ito very fluid daw ang behavior. Yan. So we developed the concept of the endpoint fallacy. Yan. Asserting that the negotiation of social reality is an ongoing process in which the new definitions produce new behavior in a never-ending cycle. The endpoint fallacy is an excellent way to explain the inconsistencies between people's behavior as they move from setting to setting. Okay. So meron naman tayong tinatawag dito na social construction of reality. Symbolic interaction is a micro level perspective, but it does take into account that social interaction is a process governed by norms that are largely determined by culture. So cultural norms offer general guidelines for the role behavior, but symbolic interactionists assert that we have latitude in the way we act our roles. So the context of the interaction is usually a key determinant of the role performance. What is appropriate role performance in one context may be inappropriate in another. So in other words, dito nagmumula yung ating mga social norms. Okay. That's why sabi dito, symbolic interactionists contend that concepts used to collectively categorize people such as race, ethnicity, and gender do not exist objectively but emerge through a socially constructed process. People called females or males are endowed with certain traits defined as feminine or masculine. And concepts such as gender, therefore, must be found in the meanings of people bring to them. So gender emerges not as an individual attribute, but something that is accomplished in interaction with others. So people therefore are doing gender. So dito na papasok yung mga theory na ang gender daw ay kinikreate ng society. So it arises from our interaction, our relationship. Okay. So in doing gender, symbolic interaction takes its lead from Irving Goffman, who developed a dramaturgy approach to social interaction. So Goffman maintained that the best way to understand social interaction is to consider it as an enactment in a theatrical performance. Like actors on stage, we use strategies of impression management, providing information and cues to others that presents us in a favorable light. So think about the heterosexual bar scene where men usually sit at a corner and operate from a script where they are expected to make the first move. If a woman is with friends, she must disengage herself as if she is selected by the man. It is probable that the women drove separately. Data from television also illustrate these concepts. Yan. So, doing difference. Research on men and women in various social networks formed at school, work, and in volunteer activities further illustrate this process. So from early childhood, these groups are usually gender segregated. So gendered subcultures emerge that strengthen the perceptions of gender differences and erode the common ground on which intimate status, equal friendship between genders are formed. Yan. So, iyan po ang ibig sabihin ng tawag dito, symbolic interactionism. So, diyan muna tayo. Then later on, I will be discussing with you topics about dadako tayo doon sa mga feminist theory, feminist perspective.